Welcome to the Be Here Now Guest Podcast. This series features a collection of teachings and conversations centered around mindfulness, spiritual growth, and living a life in balance. Each week, our diverse network of guest teachers and hosts offer up wisdom and practices from a different spiritual path and perspective. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/donate.
So today we have the wonderful opportunity to hang out with, we've been talking about Sharon all morning, so now she's going to make a live by Zoom appearance. You want to let's have Sharon come aboard here. JR's going to fix that up. There, Sharon.
Hey. Hi.
Hi, why are we talking about me all morning?
Yep, we've been talking about you all morning.
Why?
Hi.
You've been talking.
Hi. Dr. Bob.
You haven't seen each other in a while.
Yeah.
Too long.
How are you, Dr. Sharon?
I'm good. And Dr. Raghu, how are you all down there in the south of the U.S.?
That's great to see you.
Oh, yeah, really.
How's the weather up in Barrie?
It's hot and muggy, but maybe not relatively so.
Okay. Great.
So, Sharon, what we were talking about this morning, and a lot of references to you, and we're going to start with the one that we have the most fun with, and we talked about it a week or so ago when we did this other program. But you have a series of books, and in the title is the word real. Real change, real love. And now Sharon is working on a new book called Real Life, which we can't wait for. So just a little, back up a little bit. We've told this story many times, but I'm sure many people in this room maybe have not heard it yet. So one time we were in Maui, and I was doing what I'm going to do actually with Duncan Trussell on Sunday afternoon. He's going to Zoom in. Do you know who Duncan Trussell is out here? Whoa. Okay. So he was up on stage with myself and Sharon, and out of the blue, he just said, he gets where he wants to know the answer in the most basic, simplest of terms that everybody can understand. That's the beauty of Duncan. And he said, Sharon, what do you do? What is your practice? What do you do when you get up? And she said, I get up, I brush my teeth, and I sit on my mat, and I get real, Duncan. Well, Duncan went wild about that. I mean, he just couldn't. To him, it was like the secret of the universe was revealed to him in that moment. And that set off a thing where it's been years now of us talking about what does it mean to get real, and Sharon's done a number of books to explain it out. But I want to ask you right here, right now, really, what does that mean, and what is real love in particular? So go for it.
Oh, good grief. Hello, everybody. I don't know why I said that. It's a cool thing to say, and it's fun for me that you're sitting there with Dr. Bob, because many times we've had the chance to teach together, and it seemed to me that Bob is a very esteemed scholar and translator, had quite a liking for the word realistic, and he would talk about the realistic folds of the Eightfold Path or something within Buddhist teaching, and I'd be sitting there thinking, realistic's not an exciting word. Like, why get up earlier in the morning to be realistic, or make that effort, or, give up something, like sacrifice something in order to be realistic. But of course, the more I thought about it and the more he talked about it, the more I saw there's power there, because that means being in alignment with the truth. Like, I have a cup here. During the pandemic, in isolation, people started sending me mugs and cups. This one says, "Banging your head against the wall is never fun." So thank you, whoever said that. And it's kind of along those lines. You know, if you want minimum suffering, maximum openness and joy and connection, why bang your head against the wall and do those very things, whatever we're told about them? And that's part of the problem, is sort of the myth of where happiness is to be found, or what we are capable of. Like, what's realistic for me? You know, and so there's a lot to undo and kind of look at and all of that. But the process is one of freedom. So I like that thought. Now, you know, you sit down and get real. I don't know if I have many more books in me. I think it's a little bit tiresome to have the same word in the title forever. But I have other books coming out past real life, so they'll be called something different.
Just a little bit of a technical thing we're trying to figure out, Sharon. I remember you saying, though, at one time, it was when Ram Dass started talking about and teaching loving awareness. That whole term came up, remember? It's just like maybe 2009-10, not long after he had moved to Maui. And so we did this one wonderful program on loving awareness, and I remember you talking about love in the terms of how it's become something that's synonymous with weakness. And I was like, you know, not amazed, but I was really like taken aback by its absolute how the little linguistics really become an issue for us. And so then we try to dissect that and say, well, what we're really talking about is unconditional love. But there is a connection between the kind of love in which we have exchanges with people and unconditional. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the beauties of, well, I mean, there's a lot in that. First of all, you know, for a group that is attracted to bhakti yoga, you know, or devotional practice, it may not have quite the same kind of mainstream cultural issue, you know, around love. But there's an issue, you know, like it makes you stupid. It makes you kind of meek. The only thing you can do is smile. The only thing you can say is yes, thank you, you know, and you will tolerate abuse. You will not have any boundaries. And there's so many addendums to what we think of when we think of love. And that's a fascinating exercise in itself. Like, what does it bring up for you? You know, what comes with it? And, you know, it's either overly romantic or it has a lot to do with, I think, I saw this movie maybe 12 years ago now called Dan in Real Life. And I saw it many times. My goddaughter has like a minuscule part in it, and she doesn't have any speaking lines, but she barks because there's a talent show, and that's her audition to get into the talent show. I saw it many times. Loved, which was love is not a feeling, it's an ability. Love is not a feeling, it's an ability. And of course it is a feeling, and we know it is a feeling that we long for. But think of love as an ability. And as soon as I made that transition, in my mind, I realized that when I thought of love as a feeling, it was also a commodity. And it was like in someone else's hands, and they could bestow it upon me, or they could take it away from me. And I kept getting this image of myself standing at the door, and the UPS delivery person was outside the door and knocks on the door and then looks down at the address in the package and says, "No, I don't think so," and like walks away. And I'm like, wait a minute, then I've got nothing. Then I'm bereft because it's all up to you. Whereas if I think of it as an ability, it's a capacity within me that other people certainly might awaken or inspire or threaten. But ultimately, it's mine. It's mine to tender. It's mine to. It's my responsibility. If I want love in a conversation, maybe I have to be the one bringing it into the conversation. And it's a very, very different feeling, and it's actually very empowering, rather than kind of waiting for someone to deliver it. And it doesn't like cut us off from others or say they're irrelevant. They're not irrelevant, but ultimately, it's up to us. And I think of that too, like when I think of all the research that's gone on or going on into things like love and connection and social connection with healing modalities and clinical outcomes and things like that. And I always think, well, it can't just be numbers, right? It can't be like I only have 5 friends, I need 20. It must be some inner sense of feeling connected, because those who feel deeply connected might live in lots of different ways, including, as we know, people living in the jungle or whatever, quite alone. And so it's not the numbers, it's the intensity and the genuineness, I think, of that sense of connection. And that is something we're all capable of. And so that's what I would call real love. And it doesn't mean that everything else is a problem. It may not be or may not be. It may be, actually. But that's a different question. The core of it all is this sense of connection.
This retreat, when we started out on Thursday evening and introduced the theme and so on, I did quote from His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, exactly what you just said, that scientists have proved that social connection is one of the most important things in our lives. And Bob, it just remembered something. At one retreat in Maui, you gave a definition of love.
I did?
Yeah, can you give a definite? Maybe it'll hit. If it doesn't hit on it, I'll remind you.
Well, no, there is a traditional definition of Maitri, with Sanskrit, which is, metta, in Pali, that Sharon has made so famous. And, metta, with metta, people sign letters and so forth with metta. And it comes from the 2 words, sort of a combination of matar, which is mother, and mitra, which is friend in Sanskrit. So the friendship love and the mother love. And what it's defined as is the wish or the will for the happiness of the beloved. Mm. But then what I'm very intrigued by, I'm also, I think your line of questioning with Sharon is so fun, because I'm very intrigued by Sharon's, what you could call Sharon's pursuit of the real. Mm. In her thing. I didn't really think of it, the real, this real. It's really, really real. It's really good. And that's wonderful. And actually, my recent book, The One Wisdom is Bliss, is related to that. And at one point, the publisher wanted to call it Buddhism is Realism. Mm. Because that's a slogan I use also. And then I didn't like that, because I decided, most people think realism means conceding to the mess, because they think the reality is the mess, because we're brainwashed by scientific materialism to think that whatever we're seeing now is the really real. Geshe Wangyal used to say, Sharon, which you might be able to use, which is fun, he used to say that it's true, everybody is real, but the problem comes when they start thinking they're really real. Rather than relationally real, which you're making the definition, which is brilliant, of course, and marvelous. Dr. Sharon. You all have to understand that Sharon has a doctorate from Menla Mountain Retreat. Mark Epstein and I used to meet with Sharon all the time. We used to have this trio that we would do. We must do it again, by the way. And in the trio, Dr. Epstein and I'm a PhD, Dr. Bob, and then Sharon is just Sharon. So we Dr. Epstein and I, of course, in a joke, since we don't have the authority of the federal government or the state government, but in a higher reality, we decided to confer a doctorate on Sharon, because she is truly a doctor.
Beautiful ceremony. Thank you so much.
So that's why I greeted her as Dr. Sharon. It's really wonderful to pursue the real. But there's one thing you just said, Sharon, which I thought was really wonderful about the idea of love being a feeling. And this is something that is generally not addressed in the ordinary or you could say exoteric Buddhism, which is the idea that that what makes a being like an enlightened being able to will the happiness of another is some sense of their own happiness, which although they're not thinking about that, but how can you will the happiness of the beloved if you're not happy yourself in some way? And then what is that happiness yourself? Is it a feeling? And then I agree with you, Sharon. You just gave me an insight, I think, a eureka moment. I don't think it is a feeling, but actually it is bliss. But bliss is kind of a release of feeling, actually, rather than a feeling. In other words, what strangles bliss normally is where you begin to feel a little bit better, and then your mind collapses it by thinking, how good am I feeling? And the minute you think that, you're thinking, oh, that's not that good. Oh, this must be much better if I was somewhere else or with someone else or in doing something else. So actually, the actual bliss itself is where you're kind of letting go of the feeling, giving it away. So then when you have that kind of release of some sort from your sort of the knot of self-involvement and self-preoccupation, so what they call self-cherishing, atma-sneha, the wrong kind of self-love, where you're not really willing your own well-being and happiness, which when you really do, it just naturally wants to incorporate everybody else. It's like Thich Nhat Hanh's brilliant thing that Sharon also is touching here completely, same plane of interbeing and interfeeling. So I think, Sharon, you're 100% right. On the other hand, that doesn't exclude bliss, which is a kind of release of feeling, actually, which is an overflowing, and which is strangled by things. And then the last point, I was so delighted and freaked out when I was visiting Sri Lanka a few years ago, and I was reading in honor of the Theravada tradition, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the long mindfulness, focus of mindfulness sutra, but people say foundation of mindfulness. I prefer focus of mindfulness, but never mind. And then there was this wonderful moment at the end of the sutra, which is not in the shorter version, where the Buddha has given for the noble truth of suffering a long list of sensory experiences, pleasant and agreeable experiences, touch, smell, taste, mind, also and so on. And then when he comes to the third noble truth, which is the freedom from suffering, nirvana, the cessation of suffering, he says, well, now where is it? He gives the same list. And I was like, what? He just said there was no suffering. Now he gives the same list. And then he says, well, the reason it is now fine is that there's no craving. The earlier list is what makes it suffering is that you can't even enjoy anything because you're just craving more while you're having some sort of pleasure. And then you want more, and you're comparing your mind and won't let go of it, right? Because it's, as Sharon brilliantly just said just now, it's a feeling you're grabbing at. Craving, So the nirvana, but then when he said, so where is the nirvana, the cessation of suffering? And then he gives the same list. It's in all the pleasant and agreeable experiences. So the reason I loved it is it's a non-duality. It's not devaluing worldly experience by saying that there's a better place outside the world. It's saying that in the world, when you're free of craving and you're full of giving and you're like Maharaji telling Raghu, instead of meditating, feed people. In other words, do interbeing and do interconnection. That's when you're being real, rather than when you think you're getting a little special by meditating.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Exactly.
Of course, if you're meditating, and the meditating is feeding people, like Sharon teaches it and does it, and Spring teaches it and does it, then, of course, that's not getting self-involved. But, when one was first seeking, we all were. My teacher, Geshe Wangyal, he used to find me at 3 a.m. at a tree outside his New Jersey monastery, trying to meditate, and he would interrupt me. at 3 a.m. pretending to walk the dog. And he would say, "What are you doing? What are you wasting your time?" People would think we're crazy here, that people out under trees in the middle of the night, in New Jersey. And he used to interrupt me. I was very frustrated because I wanted to leave the world, I thought that was the solution. Anyway, that's enough. But thank you, Sharon, for that.
Oh, boy.
So it's the giving out of feeling through interconnection rather than the grasping at a feeling, in other words.
So this reminds me of something. Of course, this was so dear to Ram Dass, and it was so much part of his life and teachings for so long. And it was well expressed in this movie we put out of him a few years ago, Becoming Nobody, where at one point he says, "When is it enough what I want? When is it enough what I need? It's much more interesting to serve," he said. And this is what you're saying. This is what you're expressing by that classic definition, and what Sharon is saying, that when you move out of yourself, your self-cherishing, which is one of my favorite Buddhist terms, you move out of that, and then something happens that completely changes your moment-to-moment experience. And so this teaching that Ram Dass, of course, put so much emphasis in his life on service and seva and social action, really can change your innards, really. Sharon, do you want to talk a little bit about your own experience that way?
Well, Ram Dass, I think, was, certainly a pioneer. I think he had a list of firsts in my mind. The first person I knew who was working with homeless people, the first person I knew who was working with dying people, the first person I knew working with prisoners. And I thought it was great, later on, years later, when he kept using the phrase loving awareness, because it's like we can see when we're there and when we're not. And we can see when we're not because of what arises in our minds, the thoughts or criticizing somebody or putting them down or whatever, but because we hold those thoughts in a different way. It's like we take them to heart, and we have an intention of cultivating them or staying there or deepening them, instead of realizing, well, this is folly. I've been here 7 billion times before. It just left me feeling lonely or feeling ineffective or disconnected. Like, how about just making a leap or even a little stretch, like a little baby step, and seeing what it's like to pay attention to somebody instead of look right through them, or wish them well instead of go over the list of their faults, genuine though they might be, for the billionth time, same list. Like, how about just taking that step toward wishing myself well, instead of, at the end of the day, only evaluating myself to see what I've done wrong. And there's so many possibilities, and there's so much openness that's available to us when we want to experiment that way. And so I thought Ram Dass using the phrase loving awareness, and then other people using it, because he was, was a tremendous thing, because you could kind of tell. You could tell, you will tell arranging your ride out of that place, wherever you are. There's going to be a thing, no doubt, and there's going to be a moment when you realize, well, I can keep having a strong conversation. It's not like I have to give up, but maybe from a different place than the one I was heading to just 2 seconds ago, in my annoyance or frustration or whatever. Everything, it's not like, I think people become afraid that they'll be strident with themselves and always give themselves a lecture and try to be just better, pure, but it's not like that. It's so creative. The world has so much possibility when we're not bound to the habits of old, and we can see, like, what's it like when I try to be that vehicle of love and care.
The attention, when you just mentioned giving people attention, which I've often talked about. In fact, a couple of people here have asked me, what was the thing that drove you to get to India? originally, and it's when I actually physically met Ram Dass the first time after I was prompted about him. I didn't know about him when I was program director of a radio station in Montreal. And I was obviously so taken by the talk that they sent me, because they wanted me to promote his lecture at McGill University. I said, I've got to go meet him. And then when I did, there was nobody else in the house he was staying at, and he opened the door, and just immediately there was a field of complete attention. And there was no caring about Richard Alpert or Ram Dass. There was just me in the center of this universe. I mean, it was just extraordinary. So it created this trust, intuitive trust, that got me to India. And so one day, just in terms of what you said, Bob, about the will to make someone happy is what love is, basically. We were at a talk, and he was very tired. He hadn't slept well, and he just gave himself completely, and he was pretty tired. So I was pushing his wheelchair rather, and going through the crowd, and people were, wanting to stop and say hi or get a mala blessed or whatever it might be. And I was pushing through, and finally somebody really wanted his attention. But I was sorry, he's very tired. And he slammed the brakes on the wheelchair, and he looked up at me like I was nuts, for doing something like that. And he completely gave his full attention, just as he had done to me when I first met him. He gave his full attention, no matter how tired. He put himself aside. He was able to do that and really express what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah,
and it's so cool. It reminds me of my closest guru nowadays, which is my wife, Nina. And we were once having a lunch with one Indian billionaire, and he sneaked up to us when his brother was out of the room, and he said, "You've known the Dalai Lama for a long time, and did you ever see him do a miracle?" So I didn't know what to say. You have around that, if you hang around with the Dalai Lama, you have little flashes of vision, or you have the little energy surges. You feel like the buzzes and things happen. But I didn't know what to say. You're not really supposed to talk about them, so I'm kind of like this. And my wife, "Oh yes, all the time, very often," she said. So I'm like, what? And I'm looking, Nina, what? I'm looking in wonder at her myself. And the guy is really leaning forward in the chair, like this. And then he says, "Well, what was it?" And then she says, "We've been with him in many different invitations and many situations, and everybody's all crowding around and trying to get a piece of him and this and that," she said. "And in all of those years, over all of these decades, I have never seen him not give his full attention to whoever he is talking with. And that's a miracle," she said. And my jaw dropped, my mouth was hanging open, and that, was a big teaching to me. And the guy was like, "Oh, where's the magical flower from the Arctic, or the rabbit out of the hat, where's the real one?" And he couldn't get it, the guy, he didn't get it, but it was really so informative to me,
Yeah, and this is, of course, Ram Dass used to say this also all the time. At first, when I first met Neem Karoli Baba and I came back to the West, it was all about the power, the miraculous power. And then after coming back, and then he went back, which is when we went back with him, he realized that wasn't it. It was the love.
Mm-hmm, sure.
That wasn't it. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Bob? I think you have something you were going to read.
Well, I could share this. I was thinking, I don't know, it's this letter from Einstein to his daughter. Strange Buddhist thing.
Yeah.
And it's been around. Probably you all know the letter, so I don't need to read it if everybody knows that. It's a little bit well known, but a lot of especially scientific materialists were going around, it's a forgery, it's fake, no, it's not a real thing, blah, blah, blah. And so I recently saw it again, that These were from the papers donated by Einstein himself, 1,400 letters written by Einstein to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, with orders not to publish their contents until 2 decades after his death. And this is one of them, and it's for Liesel Einstein, his daughter. And so I think it's very authentic, actually. So it's sort of a different new release of it, but it's been seen before. So do you want to hear it? Do you folks want to hear it? You do? Okay. So he says, when I proposed the theory of this is some excerpt from it that I got from the net. When I proposed When I proposed, when I proposed the theory of relativity, very few understood me, and what I will reveal now to transmit to mankind, and will also collide with the misunderstanding and prejudice in the world. I ask you to guard the letters as long as necessary, years, decades, until society is advanced enough to accept what I will explain below. And then it goes right into the letter. There is an extremely powerful force that so far science has not found a formal explanation to, although I would say Indian inner science did find this explanation, not just Buddhists, general Indian inner, what they call Adhyatma Vidya, which is the name for Buddhists, actually, the Atma, Adhyatma Vidya, Adi Atma, supremely self knowledge. Vidya means science. There is that so far science has not found a formal explanation to. It is a force that includes and governs all others, and is even behind any phenomenon operating in the universe, and has not yet been identified by us. This universal force is L-O-V-E in capital letters, love. When scientists look for unified theory of the universe, they forgot the most powerful unseen force. Love is light. That enlightens those who give and receive it. Love is gravity, because it makes some people feel attracted to others. Love is power, because it multiplies the best we have and allows humanity not to be extinguished in their blind selfishness. Love unfolds and reveals. For love we live and die. Love is God, and God is love. This force explains everything and gives meaning to life. This is the variable that we have ignored for too long, maybe because we are afraid of love, because it is the only energy in the universe that man has not learned to drive at will. Man, including woman, I think. That's my footnote. To give visibility to love, I made a simple substitution in my most famous equation. If instead of E equals mc squared, as you know, that means energy equals mass times the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second or something, squared. We accept, so E equals mc squared, we accept that the energy to heal the world can be obtained through love multiplied by the speed of light squared. Try that out, 187,000 miles squared, mental mathematics. We arrive at the conclusion that love is the most powerful force there is because it has no limits. And I think maybe most of you know that. The reason that materialists think of the speed of light as an absolute is because Einstein said that light at its natural speed, its mass becomes infinite. So what that means is it's everywhere. So since we ultimately are made of this strong force, light, and we are made of light, all of us, and everything in between us is made of light, and the floor and the building and the planet and the galaxy, it's all light. Even the dark is light in the sense of transparency, of what we call in Buddhism the clear light of the void, or the clear light of emptiness. It's really the exact same thing, and this is very key. It's scientifically discovered, he is saying. Einstein, the guy who's, by getting close to it, in the middle of a world war, people used to make atom bombs, which is hatred magnified, But love, hatred against hatred or something like that. Isn't it? I think it's amazing, actually. So if we accept that the energy to heal the world can be obtained through love multiplied by the speed of light squared, we arrive at the conclusion that love is the most powerful force there is because it has no limits. After the failure of humanity in the use and control of the other forces of the universe that have turned against us, it is urgent that we nourish ourselves with another kind of energy. If we want our species to survive, if we are to find meaning in life, if we want to save the world and every sentient being that inhabits it, love is the one and only answer. Perhaps we are not yet ready to make a bomb of love. a device powerful enough to entirely destroy the hate, selfishness, and greed that devastate the planet. However, each individual carries within them a small but powerful generator of love whose energy is waiting to be released. When we learn to give and receive this universal energy, dear Liesel, we will have affirmed that love conquers all, is able to transcend everything and anything, because love is the quintessence of life. I deeply regret not having been able to express what is in my heart, which has quietly beaten for you all my life. Maybe it's too late to apologize, but as time is relative, I need to tell you that I love you, and thanks to you, I have reached the ultimate answer. Your father, Albert Einstein. Isn't that amazing?
Really?
So it's very correct of Sharon to move from real love, real change, to real life. It is. I can't wait for the book, Sharon. Where is it? I can't wait. It's really
thank you.
Where are you? It's
Give us a
wonderful.
little preview of the book.
A preview of the book. Okay, well, I, like everyone I knew, pretty much, we were all in a situation where we were either leaving the house to go to work because of what we did or family responsibilities, or we were home, working from home for a good many years. And so I was here in my house in Barrie, doing 1,000 Zoom things a day. And when Passover came around in the beginning of that whole time in 2020, I watched this show on YouTube, which is still up, which is one of my favorite things ever, called Saturday Night Seder, which was just a bunch of people home who happened to be world-class singers or whatever, celebrating Passover on Zoom, basically. And so it was one of the first productions created, not in a writer's room, but where people were not together. And I learned a lot. I laughed. I cried. It was this amazing thing. And so it reminded me that not obviously geopolitically, but symbolically, the word Egypt means a narrow place. It means being constrained, being confined, being imprisoned. And so symbolically, it's a journey from contraction to expansion, to openness to freedom. And so that's the basis of the book. That's the arc of the book. Like, what has us most contracted in life? Fear, shame, addiction, things like that. What has us feel most open? Obviously, love, loving kindness, compassion, and so on. And so that's the arc. And conditions being what they were, I got to watch it again the following year, on YouTube. And occasionally I watch it just for fun. But that was, it's the first book I've ever written where I wasn't also traveling all the time. And it was fun just to explore, like, what's it like? It's a big, big world of psychological research and all kinds of stuff that could feed into that exploration. So yes, April 11th, I think, 2023.
Oh, wonderful.
And then I have another book, which I wrote actually earlier, but it's not going to come out till later, like October 2023, which is a gift book. It's going to be illustrated with little essays and little sayings and things like that. So I've never had an illustrated book before, so that's fun too, just seeing, what do words look like on the page that feels like uniform, like seamless, not like, oh, now we're looking at a picture. So we'll see what all of that's like.
That's great.
Yeah.
Every time I read one of your books, Sharon, I am always so, especially lately in the last few, I'm so thrilled because I discover you're like a great angel with wide wings, and then within your wings you carry all kinds of people from all over the country and even the world who are doing loving and wonderful things and selfless and compassionate things, and you could bring them with you in your flight. You remember I said to you before that you're like a village. You're like you yourself are a field. You're not just an individual speaking only yourself. You give voice to all these other people you bring with you, and you show the sort of essence of them. And I really love that, and of course I expect that in real life, because it's always wonderful people. There's so many wonderful people doing wonderful things. It reminds me always of the Lotus Sutra. There's a person in the Lotus Sutra who gets excited by the Buddha's teaching there, when the Buddha teaches that everything is perfection already, that there is light, everything is light, because that's how such a person like Maharaji.
He said the same thing to Ramdas. It's all perfect, don't you see that?
And it's a secret to that attention, I think, in that they don't need a love bomb that Einstein fantasizes about to make up for the other nasty bomb. But you can't make a bomb like that. But those people who are able to give their full attention like that, and I think I rank Sharon there too, is that they see the love in the people, because the love is the life force in people. Because that's what if they have a pulse, they are made of love, and the love drives their whole system. But then they think, oh, I'm so dissatisfied. I need this, and where's my guru? And what did I do? And they're all whining and running around, and they're not noticing. But the person who gives that attention, the enlightened one, the truly loving one, they of course are empathetic to what's going wrong, and they teach them, or they do a dance, or they say something, or they don't say anything, whatever they think is best, and they're very good at sensing that, because they see in the heart of even the miserable one who's about to drown themselves in 6 inches of water. I think you didn't have that joy. Yeah. But, they see that there is that love inside them. So they're sort of not needing to bomb them. They just want to help them find that in themselves. It's not like adding something to them. They're made of it, and they see them that way. So then they're kind of the field is a very relaxed field. I think Sharon totally demonstrates that in all her books, and we can't wait to see your book, Sharon.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Bob, is your next book your autobiography? Is that true? I heard a rumor.
Say that again, Sharon.
I was wondering, Bob, if your next book was going to be your autobiography.
Well, is your next book an autobiography? Yes,
it's supposed to be, but I'm a little lost, because I returned down a contract from the sometimes brilliant publisher
Harper,
years back. That guy, what's his name, Mark Tauber, because he refused to do a autobiography of me and my wife combined. And he said, well, she can do another one later, and you just don't do yours. And so then I wouldn't sign that deal. And because I'm not me, I'm intertwined with her, and it's ridiculous. It is. It's ridiculous to pretend that the guy did it. Meanwhile, she's teaching me when she talks to a billionaire, like, I see him give him full attention, that's a miracle. And like, what? I'm like, I'm learning that. So, Dalai Lama is a great guru, etc. But, women are the greatest gurus for us guys, because we're slow. We're like dense, Men are dense about interconnection, that is, among mammals. Which guy is ready to allow another being, a total stranger, to occupy their stomach for almost a year without paying rent? which guy? And then take and deal with it and cuddle it. And like, it's a little thing comes on, give me some milk, And like, which guy's ready for that? Actually, men can give milk, actually. There's the occasional story on the desert island that this thing is like, it's like a broken Coke machine, but it does produce. It sort of produces,
Broken
in a
Coke
desperation, occasionally. But it's like, I don't know, it must be really sour. Probably tastes like beer, Anyway, so that's the next thing. But now I on her 80th birthday, I hired someone to download her stories and her life. And now that she has that, she's not so sure she wants me intertwining in there. Well, okay. She says, well, you write your own. It's okay. I say, okay, I will. And hers is so much more funny. Interesting,
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll finally, then the publisher, who we don't have a contract with yet, but she knows us and she's a friend, so she will do it. But anyway, she says, well, don't worry, Bob, we can make a box set.
Oh, yeah. That's a good idea, actually.
But I have to write mine. She says, and the box set will be called The Monk and the Model, or the Ex-Monk and the Ex-Model, something like that. Because now, after 56 years, we were voted at the beginning by all our friends on both sides the least likely to succeed ever.
Wow.
My spiritual friends were saying, what, you're in love with a model? Supermodel? What's the matter with you? And then her friends were like, you're in love with that weird ex-monk with one eye who's like penniless? And he's like, what? Where's my baking bowl? What is that? Mm. So we showed them, though, sort of. Although it's really more her than me. I'm too stupid, occasionally.
So we have a little bit of time left, and I thought maybe, is everyone interested perhaps in posing some questions for Sharon and Bob? And is that something we'd like to do? Yes. Sharon, are you okay with that?
Sure, it's great.
Okay. So just Soup's going to come over. Hopefully the mic's going to work this time. And
he's going to dance over everyone's head, and especially someone in the back.
There's someone right there close to you.
Good.
There you go. And say who it is, if you want to ask specifically or generally, and somebody will answer.
Yeah, so my question is kind of based off two premises. First, the first premise
Closer to your mouth so we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yep.
So my question is based off of two premises. The first premise is I don't think our thoughts are voluntary. I think they're a product of our environment. Like, we can't control them. I mean, if we could, I'd just quiet the mind and wouldn't have to do this lifelong pursuit of doing it. So that's the first premise. And then the second premise, so I think that our thoughts, they're kind of in the finite realm. There's a form to it. They're a reaction to a previous action. And then there's love, which I think is formless. And it's infinite, and it's exclusively mutual from the finite. It's infinite. But when we use the loving awareness, we can literally transform our thoughts. And so my question is this an example of the finite being transformed by the infinite, two mutually exclusive things? And if that's so, is this not a miracle? And does this not just open doors for everything else? Because I'm a very skeptical person, but from this retreat, I've kind of realized, whoa, I've witnessed a miracle. I've seen the formless transcend the form. And now everything's like, well, what's next? How far can this go? What else can this do? And so I'm just trying to figure out, is this correct thinking? What's your thoughts on that?
I think you... it seems directed to me. And I think you very well expressed that it is inexpressible. I think. And the best analogy that I can think of, and it's a little dangerous to get into the formless transcending the form, And in fact, the Buddha was explicit about that emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. It's the center of the famous Heart Sutra, So, and even form doesn't quite catch it, Emptiness is matter. Matter is emptiness is better, because the word rupa in that context really means matter. For example, this table, my knuckle can hit the table, and the table can resist the knuckle, because both are empty, because the table is not an absolute and the knuckle is not an absolute, and there's no absolute in either the table or the knuckle, and the table and the knuckle are the absolute as relativity, and so it can relate by knocking on it. And if I deep enough knew it, I could probably put my knuckle through it, if I knew it deeply enough, because there are spaces in there, right? In atoms, there's spaces in between, if I knew that, but I don't. So the best analogy for this inexpressibility is the mirror image. So that's very traditional. And if you look in a mirror and you see yourself, and you're maybe combing your beard in the morning, and you're washing your face in the mirror, and you see a funny-looking guy in there who's like you, but his left and right are opposite through a window. And I know that's what you see, because we have a dog who will bark at himself until he passes out. And, until you block the mirror reflection, And when we were babies, we probably stuck our hand there, to see that person. And now we correct what we see wrongly instantly, and so simultaneously we see an illusion and we correct the illusion. And then we, comb the beard, without thinking about it. So the formless is the form, is the point. And but it's very different to be thinking that the form is an absolute thing in front of you, and you're the absolute thing between you, and you're very different, and so on. And realizing simultaneously, like you realize it's an illusion, your reflection in the mirror as being just on a flat surface, and not up in a three-dimensional space beyond the window. And so your mind corrects, because you had an experience of vast space, or you saw something transcend at once, but you didn't get stuck there. You didn't stick there. You then realize that is the form, And then you can't express that, because it's enlightenment as the ultimate tolerance of almost relatively absolute cognitive dissonance. And then your mind is wide open, and then you really feel the suffering of another, and you can't bear it, like your own suffering on a hot pot on the stove or something. And you don't think, shall I be compassionate? Shall I love that person, in the sense of not tolerate them suffering and want them to feel free of it? And automatically, just like you do about your own hand, your own fingertip, when you put it on the hot pot without knowing it was hot, And that's when you are form and formless simultaneously, but you can't grasp it by a description. Your description will go round and round and round and round, and it'll be, because it's inexpressible, but it is not unexperienceable. And to those enlightened beings, that's why when they look at us and they see some poor professor, like, where am I going? Oh, I don't want to catch COVID. But they see a bliss energy that is the beating heart, that is our life force and our health force. And they see that, and then they're even cool. They don't even interfere too much. And they tell you, don't meditate, because they know you'll go the wrong way, because you're self-concerned. So they say, feed somebody, and then you automatically, it's like the Dalai Lama says, you want to be happy, you want to be selfishly successful, to be happy yourself, be compassionate. Forget about yourself and you'll be happy, sort of thing. He says that, And I think we can say that sort of thing, because we're not trying to express the ultimate non-duality of the form and the formless, We're living it, right? How about that?
We'll send you this excerpt so you can meditate on it and think about it. Anybody else? Let's go back there, because we never do back there. Somehow we only do in the front.
I want to thank you so much for bringing the Sutra of Einstein And it really shows that he was not only a genius in terms of quantum mechanics, but genius in terms of consciousness that respects the life force and love. That formula of E equal MC squared is still incomplete. They haven't unified everything, and it has to do with the fine particles. The tests that they're doing where they're always the same, you've heard of this before, at a distance, but when somebody is there, they're always linked. When somebody's not observing that, they switch. And this shows that consciousness is at the heart of existence. And the bliss that you're talking about, it's absolutely real, and there's no limit to it. And I just want to thank you. I really appreciate that. I'd like to get a hold of that letter, and someone should write about that and tell that story that Einstein was really saying, this is the secret that I couldn't tell anybody. But this is what you're here and you're living for. So thank you so much for bringing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Soup right behind you.
Namaste. Thank you for taking questions. In the last session, we broke out into groups, and one of the things that came up in my group around loving awareness is that it's hardest or most difficult around the people that we've been in relationship for the longest, like parents, lovers, etc. And one of the ideas that I had around it, which comes from yoga, this idea of samskaras that we create, that we have these habits. And so the longer that we've been in relation with somebody, the deeper these habits are of treating them or being treated in not loving awareness, which is hard to like fall away from that. In yoga, my understanding from my teachers is like it takes as long to dissolve the habit as it has to create the habit. And just wondering your thoughts around this idea of that it becomes really difficult, this loving awareness around the people that we are closest with.
Yeah. Sharon, this might be good for you to respond.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think I always try myself to go back to the relationship between awareness and love, you could say. Because rather than think, another way we think of love is something strained, like I've got to force it into this encounter, or why wasn't it there, or it's so finite, like, if I'm not loving, it's never going to develop. The idea of developing love or cultivating love seems cold. But it's really not, because it's very much seen in Eastern psychology as an emergent property of how we pay attention. It's like if you go into that grocery store and you don't look at the checkout person, you look through them, and you somehow denigrate them or you objectify them, you don't really see them as a person, there's not going to be that sense of connection, which means no love. And if you only think of yourself in the worst terms, like at the end of the day, only pretty much think about the mistakes you made and how you failed and how you didn't show up, there's not going to be that. There's not going to be just like the upliftment, the sense of connection that will be love. And so what we work on is how we pay attention, not somehow try to manufacture or fabricate a state that's not there. And who do we, as you're speaking, I thought, who do we pay very little attention to? I guess it's the people we've known the longest, like somebody starts telling a story and we think, I know how that ends, or, we make a lot of assumptions. Oh, they're going there again, or why can't they, change that? Or, and we're not really holding people in that light of, okay, here we are, you and I, let me listen, or let me really be here, let me pay attention. And so much will have to do with how we pay attention. So it's kind of a cute reflection. I don't know about it being the longest. I mean, there's always something, right? It's like whether we're offering loving kindness to ourselves and it's difficult, or we're offering loving kindness to a benefactor, someone who's helped us so much, and we realize I just took them for granted. I didn't really think about them in the longest of times. Or there was that one time they really weren't there for me. Maybe they're not my benefactor. Maybe they're my difficult person, or we're offering loving kindness to neutral people, the ones on the street that we don't really know. And we realize I am like in a bubble, I don't really pay attention to anybody. Or it's a difficult person, someone who has hurt us, and finding that place where we still feel empowered to protect ourselves or take care of others, and yet we're not overcome with hatred or fear of someone else. It's not an easy place, but it's there. And so there's always something that we are challenged by, and it's also what makes it real, I will say. It's not like just taking on some elevated, rhetoric that we're then going to pass into life. It's like we're trying to make this real and live by this. And so that's the challenge.
Lovely. Thanks, Sharon. We're at the end of this session. Tomorrow morning, just in terms of perhaps more interaction, tomorrow morning, Sharon and Spring are going to do practice, meditation practice, and so on, and there'll be time to ask some questions of them. And then Bob and Krishnas are going to be on after, and that we'll have some more opportunity there. And the other thing I want to mention is, of course, this afternoon, Shantala is doing a music presentation, and then Krishnadas is doing a workshop, which he does do a lot of interaction, a Q&A and so on. And then he's doing his kirtan. I'm mentioning this now because we're going to, just before the kirtan starts, we're going to play, I think we've mentioned a little bit, but we have a film that's debuting this fall that is about our really close mentor. Krishnadas calls him his Indian father, K.C. Tiwari. I'm sure you've heard of him as well, who would go into these extraordinary states of samadhi at the touch of nothing. He just would go out. Anything that was spiritually uplifting just put him into this state of no pulse, no breath. I mean, amazing yogi, except he was a schoolmaster at a school, headmaster at a school in the foothills of the Himalayas. We're going to play the trailer to that, and Krishnadas and I'll maybe talk about it a little bit, so something worth being here a little bit earlier. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Dr. Sharon. Thank you.